Well, the CEO of the Australian Sports Commission, Kieran Perkins, is behind these new guidelines and joins us now. Kieran, how do you strike the balance between so-called fairness and inclusivity?
Look, it's an incredibly complex and difficult thing because there's no single answer for every sport. And so putting together these guidelines, we obviously engaged a very wide and diverse group of people. And not surprisingly, the guidelines therefore give us a really good umbrella framework to be able to have then the right conversations about how each individual sport can approach their own unique background and experience.
Kieran, this conversation is often positioned as trans athletes are coming for your medals, but realistically, how many elite trans athletes are there at the moment?
You know what, that's actually a fantastic question, and I couldn't answer it other than to say that I think globally there's been maybe 4 to 6 instances that have hit the headlines that we talk about. In Australia, I'm aware so far of 2 athletes who have gone through the process of looking to be included. But your point's well made. There's this image that gets put out there. There's some not particularly helpful or appropriate language that gets thrown out about, men coming in to dominate and overtake women's sport. And it's just not true. That is not what it's about. It's actually, as we would expect, people who come from a diverse part of the community who struggle to find their own community support and the ability to integrate, who are looking for a way to be involved in something which we all know makes us all better physically, mentally, and of course creates great opportunities for social cohesion.
Kieran, if you put yourself at odds with world aquatics and athletics here, it seems to me that your ruling and regulation is not as strong as theirs.
Look, we certainly do take a very different view to those 2 organisations which you've mentioned, and it is going to be, one of the more challenging parts of the evolution of this because, of course, the IOC has come out with their guidelines, which, our guidelines align to very nicely. Those sports that have taken these other views are going to find themselves, really struggling to work out how do they navigate all of the different jurisdictions they operate in and those jurisdictions' legal frameworks. In this country, our guidelines are very clear in pointing out that we need to understand the Sex Discrimination Act and recognise that maybe some of these guidelines that have internationally been imposed don't hold water here legally and wouldn't have a place necessarily for the way that Australia would like to see us operate and manage sport.
You're one of the greatest swimmers of all time. Kate Campbell, one of our other great swimmers of all time. These regulations would be at odds with her public statements. I don't want to verbal her, but she's been on this program and she's spoken publicly about not wanting to compete against trans swimmers. I'll frame it that way. What would you say to Kate?
Look, I actually completely understand Kate's concerns and the concerns of many female athletes because let's not forget our female athletes are underrepresented. They're not given the same opportunity as male athletes. We don't see the level and quality of female coaches at an international level, administrators, volunteers, the list goes on. So it is completely understandable that people within sport who have fought so hard for so long to get equality compared to their male counterparts, see this as a challenge and a risk for them. What I'd say is let's sit down and have the conversation, talk through the issue, talk through where these guidelines lead us to, and let us assure you that no cisgendered athlete is going to be inadvertently disadvantaged through this because we do want to provide equality, but we do want to ensure that it is an equitable place for all to compete.
Kieran Perkins, thank you so much for joining us.
It's an absolute pleasure. Thanks for having me.